Hello, everyone. Welcome in. If you're just logging in, feel free to use the chat button at the bottom of your screen to let me know where you're listening from tonight. We're going to get started in just a few moments here. I'm just going to wait for a few more folks to log in, but welcome to everyone that's here already. My name is Meghna Jaradi. I'm the event manager here at Larder, and we're really excited to have you all here in our virtual space. Hi, Kathleen, joining us from Olympia. Welcome. So it definitely was not necessarily part of our plan at this point to continue to do virtual events, but we are pushing on and we're excited to have you all here. It's been sort of a blessing in disguise to be able to do our virtual events and connect with folks really from all over the world, all over the country, all over the city, in a way that's been really special over the last year and some change. So we're really thankful to continue to have this platform to share with you all. Hi, Deanna. Deanna's tuning in from Beacon Hill. We've got Mara joining us from Vashon Island, Carmen from Green Lake in Seattle. Welcome. I'm going to give this just a few more moments as we wait for folks to come in. Hi, Angie. Angie's visiting, or Angie's joining us from North Bend. Okay. All right. Well, again, my name is Meghna Jaradi. I am the event manager here at Larder in Seattle. We are a community cookbook store, a small local business, and like I was mentioning just earlier, we are really thankful and really lucky to be able to continue to welcome in folks from all over the country in our virtual event space here. Tonight we are going to be joined in conversation by Andrea Pons, who's the author of the cookbook MAMACITA. I'll try to show it to you if the green screen will allow. There we go. It's there. We also were joined by Kelly Singer, who is the owner of Kinfood Co. Both of them will talk a little bit more about what MAMACITA and what Kinfood are as we get started here in just a few moments. But before we get to that, just a few logistical items. We will have signed copies of MAMACITA available here at Larder. You can purchase your copy at booklarder.com, and I will share a link in the chat for anyone that's interested in grabbing a copy. And as we are here in the virtual event, if you have any comments that you'd like to share, if you want to chat with anyone who's attending the virtual event, please use the chat function. We will have a little bit of time at the end of the event for a Q&A session with Andrea and Kelly. If you have questions for them that you can think of throughout the event, do drop them in the Q&A button. That's also at the bottom of your screen. That'll just help us keep track of all of your wonderful questions that we'll be able to ask tonight. If you registered for the event, you are actually entered into a drawing to win some MAMACITA swag. We will contact anyone that is a winner at the end of the event between tonight and tomorrow. So stay tuned for that announcement. And also this author talk will be posted on our YouTube channel within 48 hours. So if you want to rewatch it, or if you know someone who might enjoy it and you want to share this author talk, that will be posted on our YouTube channel after the event as well. Without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Andrea Pons and Kelly Singer. Thank you both for joining us tonight. Really excited to chat with you both.
Hello. Hi, everyone. I'm Andrea. I'm the author of MAMACITA, and got my own little copy here. But before I start, I really wanted to take a brief moment to acknowledge all of you who are here today. I am incredibly humbled by the turnaround of this event, and want to thank all of you for making this space and making this time to sit with us for the next hour. Mamacita has always been about community. When I started writing the book, my initial intention was to introduce a more intimate and different lens into the immigration process. And I just feel really humbled and honored to be able to do that with you today. And the truth is that the title that you see under my name of immigration activist is one that I don't fully embody yet, but one that I'm really aspiring to. And I believe that by having this sort of conversations and by continuing to partner with people like Kelly from Kinfood, I can get there. So thank you all for providing that safe space for me. And really, to me, there's no better door or outlet into learning about another culture than to eat something from that culture. In that same manner, I believe that there's no better way to learn about immigration than through the lens and service of food. And so with that, something that is really important to me to focus on is that today there's more than 3 million immigrant and seasonal farmers estimated in the US. And according to the National Center of Farm Workers Health, 75% of those are foreign born and 69% of them are from Mexico. What was even more surprising to me when I was doing my research while writing the book, it was to find out that 45% of those Mexican immigrant farm workers come from West Center states in Mexico, like Guanajuato, which is actually where I'm from. So to me, there's just this really big connection between immigration and our health, in the sense that the most nutritious food and way that we can eat is by eating local. And most of us are pretty aware of that. But what's even better is that by eating local, we're also supporting communities and we're supporting our local economy. So it's really this kinship of food, culture, community, and tradition that drew me into doing this collaboration with Kelly. And I just love that Kinfood has the ethos that if we support local farmers, in return, Kinfood can bring you closer to learning where your food is from. That's something that is really important to me and really important in the MAMACITA project overall. So before we dig deeper into talking more about MAMACITA, I would love to pass the mic over to Kelly so she can tell you a little bit more about this awesome collaboration.
Thanks, Andrea. We are very excited to partner with Andrea and feature MAMACITA and some exclusive recipes that Andrea has created just for our collaboration, which we'll chat about a little bit later. But first, I just wanted to talk to you about what Kinfood is all about and how we got started. It's really, like Andrea was saying, underpinned by this ideal of kinship, not only with our local farmers and producers, but also with the earth and each other. We are striving to create this community of people who just really love local food. And more than anything, local food is fun, it's exciting, it's delicious, it's interesting. Of course, it's better for the environment and also for the local economy, but we just feel like it's the best way to eat and connect with each other. So that's really why we continue to do what we do each week. And Kinfood, as a business, is a curated farm box that we deliver around Seattle every week. And we have a team of 7 Kinfoodies, as we call ourselves. And we look at the fresh eats from local farms each week. We have a local chef on staff, and we select the produce that will go into the box each week and then create recipes around those 9 or 10 items that are going to be delivered, and also pair it with a local wine that is grown with natural farming practices from the West Coast. So it's really this expression of, food from your hometown that captures. We really, strive to capture the time and place and people who produce the food and the wine and the recipes, and also just the ethos and kind of the zeitgeist of what's going on currently and how food has a role in that. I guess just a little bit of background on Kinfood. Before Kinfood, I was a management consultant in Europe. So I don't come to Kinfood from a food background, but from a business background. But one of the projects I was working on in Europe was with a very large European supermarket who was trying to streamline their supply chain. And I'm sure everyone's heard of the dark web. Well, grocery stores are the dark web of food. There's just so much waste and pollution that is involved with these large grocery chains. It's enormous, and that really opened my eyes just to how food gets to our tables. And so I started reading, books by Mark Bittman and Michael Pollan, who were really, I think, instrumental in the way I began to think about food, and specifically, Mark Bittman's cookbooks. They were just so powerful, and really just, for me, it was life-changing. It put me on a different trajectory. And at that time we were living in Paris, and street markets in Paris, farmers markets in Paris are an event. It's truly like that scene from Julie and Julia where Meryl Streep is, chatting it up with the stand or the market vendors, and she's eating a baguette and tasting cheese and, looking at a pig's head. It is amazing. You want to spend the whole day there, and you cannot wait until the next one. And so that combined with our work visa at the time was about to expire, but we weren't quite ready to leave Europe. And a friend of mine had a little brother who was living in the US and had just applied for a startup visa in Denmark. And so I thought, well, what the heck? I had this idea that there could be a way to use technology to deliver farmers market goods like grocery delivery, like basically like Amazon was doing for grocery. And so I applied for this startup visa in Denmark with the idea that, we could be zero waste and zero carbon emissions because everything would be delivered by bike. Wrote up the whole business plan, applied for the visa, and then my husband was offered a job in Seattle that we couldn't say no to. And so we found ourselves back in Seattle, and I still had this dream of the farmers market delivered to your doorstep. And so I just started doing it for friends and neighbors, and it eventually grew into what Kinfood is today. So we've just celebrated our first year anniversary in June, and we just love partnering with projects and guest curators like Andrea, who are really truly using food as a vehicle for social change and to bring people closer together, which is what we strive to do with every box that we deliver on Friday. I'll pass it back over to Andrea.
Thank you, Kelly. I honestly could not be more excited for this collaboration. And at the end of this talk, we'll talk a little bit more about the 3 special recipes that I developed specially for this. But I know you guys are all excited to start digging deep into Mamacita. So I'm ready. Let's do it, Meghna.
Let's start this thing. Andrea, I was so excited to look through the copy of the book that you sent to the store. And as I was reading through it, I was really struck by your story. We're going to get into all of the nitty gritty. But personally, as someone who grew up in a family of immigrants, I was born here in Seattle, actually. Your story really resonated with me. And I wanted to sit down and chat with you about what your experiences have been like, where there's some overlap, and also just what you're working on now and what you're working towards in the future. So thanks for trusting me with this. One of the major themes I think that came up in Mamacita was just this love that you have for your family. So much of the book is completely grounded in love of family. And for those of you who don't know, this is actually a self-published book. Andrea has self-published this book as a way to raise money to pay for her parents' immigration fees, which is pretty huge. In the book, you mentioned that Mamacita is your father's nickname for your mom, which I think is really sweet, and I hope you'll tell us a little bit more about that. But you also talk a lot about Team Pons, and I just wondered if you could share with the audience tonight, like, tell us more about your family. Tell us what Team Pons means to you, what that means within your family, and yeah, we'll go from there.
Totally. I'm really happy that that is something that resonates with the cookbook, with others, just the sense of family. I think you put it perfectly. I remember being little. The reason why I named it Mamacita is exactly that. Like when I was little, I remember my dad would always be like, Linda Mamacita to my mom. It's stuck to me. I don't know if before I knew her name, I maybe thought that my mom's name was because he would say it so often. So Linda Mamacita was always, like beautiful lady, beautiful mom. And that really is who my mom is. She's just this amazing, ever just powerhouse. And where Team Pons came from, that really originated since the moment my family immigrated here. When I came to the US, I had just a luggage, my parents, my sister, and that's it. We only knew another family in the US. They were friends that came to the US 5 years before us. But besides that, I left and we left everyone else behind. And when I lived in Mexico, just to give guys a little idea of the neighborhood I grew up in, my neighborhood was primarily my dad's family. I had aunts and uncles that lived just blocks down the way. My cousins, it would not be a weird Tuesday if they suddenly were dropped off by my uncles and aunts while they went shopping. My cousins would just hang out at our house. So my best friends were my family. My best friends were my cousins. The people that I looked to for advice were my uncles and aunts and my grandparents. And so when we lost all of that by moving here, Team Pons became my mom, dad, and sister. And we just became this very strong unit because truly the first 10 years that we were here were really hard. It's kind of like when you start a new business and they say that the first 5 years are really hard. Well, moving to the next country, a new country, I would say that at least a decade is really hard. We had to struggle to make money. My parents started to sell of all of our assets in Mexico once they saw that my sister and I had an opportunity for a brighter future here. And so we really leaned on each other for support. I call my sister my sidekick a lot because it was only the two of us. So it didn't matter what we were doing or what situation we were in. We were always going to be Team Pons. And, it was 4 months after we moved here, the living situation with our friends didn't work out anymore. And we were struggling to find a place to live. So the first real place that I lived in with just my family was a small apartment around 400 square feet on top of a Mexican restaurant. I didn't have beds or furniture or anything. My sister and I would often lay on the floor in our bedroom because we could hear soccer playing in the TV that was stuck to the ceiling, at the restaurant. And that was my entertainment. And then our couch was all of our clothes in plastic bags with a bed sheet over it. And those 5 months that we lived in that apartment were some of the happiest months, in my opinion, because it was back to just being Team Pons. It was back to just being my parents, my sister, and I. And as long as we had each other, it didn't really matter what else was happening on the outside. So we always go back to that as a family. If any of us is struggling with anything, Team Pons kind of comes to the rescue. So that's really the background of why we call each other that.
That's Team Pons. Yeah, I love that image of you as a unit. And I don't know if any of you who are listening got to see we posted on Instagram about this event. There's a really lovely picture of Andrea and her family that are within that post that I can share around in a bit. I love that. I think that one of the things I was wondering as I was reading this book, and knowing that your experience was so grounded in family, is also like my experience as a family, as coming from a family of immigrants, was this idea of like suddenly you are straddling two cultures, and you're not quite completely part of one or the other. There's a line in the intro of Mamacita where you that I could really identify with, and you said, "I grew up to be afraid of myself." I know that a lot of those experiences, based on what you included in the book, were tied to things that happened at school, where you're separated from your family unit. You share a lot of examples of your ESL class, teachers that were misunderstanding your cultural customs, and even classmates that really that were really narrowing in on your accent and your appearance, saying things like, you don't look Mexican, say something in Spanish, or show us your green card. And I can only imagine like how isolating that must have felt, because again, you're separated from your family unit and you're sort of experiencing this in isolation. I just wondered, did this experience ever bleed into the way that you felt about your cultural food and your dishes? Did it change how you related to your family and your culture? I know I definitely experienced a lot of like lunchbox moments. I don't know if anyone in the audience knows what that is, but it's this idea of, you bring your cultural food to school and your classmates are saying like, that looks gross. What is that? You become ashamed of your food and your culture. So I guess I just wanted to know a little bit more there. Like, was that something that you experienced? And what was that like for you?
Yeah, this question is super interesting to me because I didn't experience, I guess the word shame or fearfulness comes to mind. I didn't experience that when I thought of the food that I was eating that was like my cultural food, because to me, it was almost like separating two words. I kind of still think about my childhood in this way. When I think of my childhood, it almost feels like I'm watching a movie about little me, and little me still lives in Mexico and has that life. And then I am here, today, and I'm living this life. So there's almost this like the separation, or there was the separation before I started writing the cookbook, of like, Mexico is this, all the dishes from Mexico are this, and then I'm living this life.
Sure.
Something really wonderful that my mom did is that she never steered away from helping my sister and I be proud of our culture. So even though we were living in the US, I was still celebrating Mexican Independence Day, is still going through a lot of beautiful Mexican traditions like Dia de los Muertos, which is Day of the Dead, and then just other cultural things like posadas, which happen around Christmas time. That's when we break piñatas and, light candles, and have moments of prayer and community. And so I didn't steer away from that, but although I didn't have a lunchbox moment, because most of my lunches were, the only thing different, I would say, is my sandwich de jamon, which is a, ham sandwich. Instead of having mayo, it had sour cream, which if you guys haven't tried that, you totally should, because it's really delicious. But no one could, tell that it was sour cream. But I was nervous, I would say, as a kid, especially in middle school, having a really thick accent, and all throughout high school and most of my college career, I was really afraid of bringing people home. Home felt like a sacred space. So my lunchbox moment was actually a dinner time moment, because the way that my family gathered around the table and the way that we ate and the food that we ate was very different than when I would go to my friends' homes and people would eat around the TV. Instead, my family was like, we're going to sit and look at each other in the eye and talk about our day, in a very genuine way. Like, are you having a bad day? Let's talk about it, and we'll give each other advice. And I was really nervous to introduce people to the food that I was eating, because people would think, oh, I'm going to Andrea's house, we're going to eat Mexican food. And in their head, they're expecting Taco Bell, you know?
Right.
And I'm here like, here's a chile relleno. Have you ever eaten a stuffed pepper that is not filled with ground turkey? I'm going to show you a different way of eating peppers. And, you know, people being afraid of like the spiciness, or I also just kind of felt like if I brought people home, I was putting my family in a vulnerable place. I didn't want to have to bring someone home that would, maybe they had good intentions, but I would hate it if maybe they happened to question my family. Like if they heard my parents' accents and started asking like, well, why did you move here? How did you move here? Did you cross the border? How did you cross the border? Like those were the things that I was afraid of, more than being afraid of the food that represents my culture.
Mhm. Yeah, and it requires a lot of vulnerability, I think, to be able to bring someone into your home, having the experiences that you had at school, you know, with some of your classmates. Um, I hear you talking about like the sort of siloed approach to food where like, you know, Mexican food is Mexican food and American food is American food, you know, often in immigrant cultures, food is sort of one of our only ways sometimes to reconnect with our culture of origin. And one of the ways that you're able to really maintain a solid connection to your culture. I can totally remember growing up and making rotis with my grandma and really hating it because it was just such a tedious process and I couldn't get the techniques quite right. I'm curious to know actually if you ever experienced a moment where you felt like you could fuse your two identities, and then also what has it been like for you to reconnect with your culture through food? You talk a little bit about that in Mamacita, how like in your 20s this was sort of part of your healing journey, was really taking the time to learn about your cultural food and make it and cherish it. And then also I was hoping if you would share a little bit more about like how that ties into your work as a food stylist, because you do that today. So what was the transition like between, Andrea in school inviting her friends to dinner to where you are today as a professional food stylist that has now reconnected with her culture?
Yeah, I think I grew a lot into myself when I started living alone. I think that by having that space of it's just me, right? I think a lot of us sometimes are really afraid of being in that space, of being by ourselves. But I truly found it to be one of the most healing times of my life, because when you're alone with your thoughts, you start to look for ways to comfort yourself. And my comfort was creating the dishes that were passed down from my grandmother. And those dishes were passed on to my mom. So there were dishes that I grew up eating. And so I was, I would spend countless hours in my kitchen trying to recreate them, because I didn't have the measurements. I didn't have like a, proper Mexican market next door. So it was a really fun challenge of hitting up different grocery stores and trying to source those ingredients that I was familiar with. And I think that's where the transition between Mexican food is here and American food is here combined, because I'm not in Mexico. So sometimes I won't be able to find the specific type of chile. But I can find something that's similar, and I can find something that's like locally grown. And so I will go for those ingredients and then modify the recipes a little bit, right? I still want them to taste as close to home as possible. But that was like a big aha moment for me of like, I'm home. Like I really felt like I had finally come home to myself. And so while I was making this Mexican dishes, I also started to transition from being an editorial stylist to wanting to be more of a food stylist. And what really made me realize that is that when I was making the dishes, I was kind of plating them in a non-traditional way. I would plate them, in a more artistic way.
Mhm.
And that really opened up my eyes to the world of food styling. And I've just found this huge passion of, being in production and being a cook, and how the two could marry each other. So from that moment on, I started being the one to invite people over. I'm like, come to my home, try this dish that I made. And it was that spark for people that really inspired me to make the cookbook. It was like when I would make a dish for someone, and there's nothing better than making a dish for someone with love, knowing that they're gonna love it.
Mhm.
So I would like sit there, just like waiting to see
Waiting.
their reaction. And when they took that bite and just took that second to like close their eyes and savor it, I'm like, all right, like this is a part of Mexico I want people to see. Like this is the part of my childhood that I'm ready to own up to. And so I made a promise to myself, that fall that I started writing the cookbook, that I was no longer going to hide and be afraid to show up as Mexican. Something that I talk about in the book is when my family first moved here. I think my parents had the best intentions. They were really afraid that my sister and I would face racism, so they wanted us to play up the fact that we're white presenting. And it took me many, many years to understand how that actually ended up having an impact in my own identity. But for a very long time, I would tell people that I was Mexican Italian because I have a great grandmother that's Italian. Matter of fact is I'm Mexican as can be. I feel really proud to be Mexican, and I didn't want to not honor that or give it the credit that it deserves to fully be Mexican. I feel like Mexican people are so hardworking and have so much to give that why would I take that part of me and not share it with people? Why can't I fully own up to that? So I made that promise to myself then, and back then too, I saw the connection of how this cookbook could help me explore and communicate that part of being a Mexican immigrant to other people and celebrating being a Mexican immigrant. That's why that's in the subtitle of the cookbook, because the cookbook is really about celebrating your roots, celebrating who you are. And I think that when we start focusing and start realizing that where we're from or the culture behind us plays a really big part in how we show up in this world, then we can all just be better people.
Yeah. And it sounds like this has sort of been like you touched on this a little bit, but the intersection of your activism is really like it's at the intersection of food and being proud of who you are and showing that like it's okay and it's safe to do that, and also it gives you the space to advocate for others. I'd like to actually get a little bit more into immigration, as this is also a central focus of the book. As I mentioned before, the MAMACITA started as a project so Andrea could raise money for her parents' immigration expenses. So it's definitely a huge part of the conversation, as we heard a little bit about already. And this is a super pertinent conversation today, especially I think as refugees are arriving from Afghanistan all over the country. It's not news that Americans are often fearful of immigrant communities, and that shows up in a lot of different ways. I remember often being told that I should go back to where I came from. That's a very, I think, unfortunately common rhetoric that comes up. And we could do a whole other talk actually about immigration and the ins and outs of immigration. But I wanted to talk about some key things from your story. Can you talk a little bit about why welcoming immigrants into our country is important right now, especially, and how you've sort of approached that in your work?
Totally. I think you hit it right in the head. I think to start, one of the two biggest misconceptions about welcoming immigrants into a country is that there's going to be a scarcity for jobs, and that the immigrants coming in are maybe dangerous and that we should be afraid. I think those are the two biggest misconceptions. But in reality, what's actually happening, at least when it comes to, the workforce, is that when immigrants join the workforce, they actually increase the productive capacity of the economy and they raise the GDP. When the immigrants' incomes rise, so do US natives' incomes. It's actually a phenomenon that's usually referred to as immigration surplus. And so what happens with immigration surplus is that the GDP goes up for natives as well as immigrants. And some people say like it's very small. They say it's like 0.2% to like 0.4%, but that's still 36 to 72 billion dollars a year. So it's actually a pretty significant amount. And in addition to the immigration surplus, immigrants grease the wheels of the labor market by flowing into industries and areas where there is a relative need for workers, because immigrants are not as tied to where they live initially, especially like native people in the US are. Um, they're more likely to move to states and cities that need workers. So that helps alleviate a lot of bottlenecks and helps accelerate the expansion and growth of the economy. So having immigrants into the country is actually beneficial. It's not creating less jobs, it's actually generating more jobs, and it's helping everyone around. Another misconception is that we don't pay taxes, and I want to touch on that really briefly, because when you come into the country as an immigrant, you can still sign up for a taxpayer ID, which is what my family did. And so although we're not getting Social Security benefits when we retire, we're still contributing to the economy in the places that we live in by paying taxes. So people shouldn't be fearful of that. But most importantly, I think the benefits of having immigrants go beyond the economy. Being a diverse country really allows us to be more culturally rich, and learn from each other's differences and each other's similarities as well. And it also creates a safer space. As odd as that might sound to some people, some of the countries with the best immigration policies also happen to be the safest countries. Some of those are Canada, Sweden, Switzerland, Australia, and Germany. And instead of investing so many funds into keeping immigrants out, they're actually utilizing those funds to create free healthcare, free education, and other public benefits as well. So when you look at the cons and pros of immigration, the pros will always outweigh the cons, no matter what you're looking at. Yeah,
definitely. And there's really no easy way to go about it, but like here we are starting this conversation, and hopefully continuing to share the experiences that you've had. At the end of Mamacita, we talked a little bit about this before, but I think that a lot of people don't really know a whole lot about what the immigration process entails and how difficult it can be if you're going through it. That it requires a great deal of privilege and financial stability sometimes to do it the right way. You include some resources within the book, just contact information for the lawyer that you actually work with on your case. Can you speak a little bit to the importance of having a lawyer as you're going through this process?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think a really easy way to put it is think of yourself as fresh out of college and you want to invest in the stock market. Like that's what it feels like to go through the immigration process. It's like numbers everywhere, lots of, it feels really overwhelming, and a little bit scary, and it makes you feel a little bit of an imposter syndrome when you try to do it. And so the importance of a lawyer, as the way I've seen it personally throughout my family applying for immigration and for status, is that a lawyer is there to decipher the puzzle, which is ever changing. So sometimes, there would be applications that are submitted and those applications end up changing because the immigration policy changes 6 months into your application being submitted. So whatever you submitted does no longer apply, and now you have to apply for something else. But if you think someone's going to give you a phone call or send you a piece of mail or an email telling you that it's changed, they won't. They're not going to tell you that it's changed and they're not going to give you directions on how to apply for the next step. So without a lawyer, you're kind of on your own to figure those things out, and the information is not always readily available or super clear on the USCIS website, which is the United States immigration website. So it's really hard. It's really hard. It's almost like having to hire a translator so you can communicate in a different country. And I put immense value in having a lawyer to go through this process, but I also acknowledge how financially invasive it can be to have a lawyer. I had the fortune and the privilege to be single, to not have children, to have a stable job, and to have a savings account. And that's really what helped me put my immigration forward. There's many people out there like my parents that are not as fortunate, and people in even worse situation than my parents. I think of single immigrant mothers who have children who, are trying to make ends meet. Can she sacrifice 10 grand this year to gain legal status? I think that's the way that we need to start looking at things. It's not that immigrants don't want to be, with legal status. Like, of course we want to. We want to be safe. We want to have the same benefits that people who live, work, and contribute to this country have. But mainly, we just want to feel at home, and we want to know that if a relative is sick in our country of birth, that we can come visit them without losing everything that we've worked for in this country. So lawyers are really important in that sense. And I hope someday there's enough immigration reform to where it's either more affordable to become a permanent resident or citizen, or where the immigration process has been streamlined so much that it's easy to do it.
Right. We in the intro, you talk about how last June, the reason you had to hire a lawyer was because you were facing the reality of being deported. And that after 10 years of putting in lots of work on immigration paperwork that was already in the works, it suddenly sort of vanished. It no longer was applicable, no longer applied to your case. Can you talk a little bit about why things like that happen in the immigration process? Why is it that you had to start over and seek a lawyer and continue on after that?
So unfortunately, what happened in my case is that a process that I started during one presidential administration changed when a new presidential administration happened. As we know, that happens every 4 years. Unfortunately, when I had first started the process of removing the conditions on my green card, which for those of you that haven't had a green card, when you first obtain a green card, it's only valid for 2 years. And then after that, you have to apply to get the restrictions taken out, and then the green card becomes valid for 10 years. And it's in that 10-year span that you can apply to become a citizen. Well, I had applied to get the restrictions taken out of my green card, and the process was so delayed that it was another 2 years that had gone by until I heard back from the offices. So what happened during those 2 years is that I had an extension on my expired green card, but I didn't feel safe to travel or do anything during that period of time, because who's going to feel safe with a tiny piece of paper that says I can stay here? What if I lose it? Anything like that. So really afraid. And then, resubmitted paperwork after those 2 years to get the restrictions taken away because I hadn't heard anything back. And unfortunately, when you log on online and you see the process of where your status is at, as far as your application goes, it still said that it was going to take 36 months. So I'm waiting. So, you know, I was waiting a very long time, and I would check monthly to see if the date changed at all. And then nothing was changing. And to my surprise, last June, just a week before my birthday, I come home to a letter from the USCIS, and I was really excited, thinking, finally, some news, some good news. Instead, what I received was a letter threatening deportation unless I provided more information about being a legal resident, which, as you guys know, at this point, I only had an expired green card and an extension to stay. So in a panic, I knew that my only option would be to hire a lawyer, which is exactly what I did. I hired Diego, who I added his information in the cookbook because I really find that his wisdom and help throughout this process is, again, invaluable. And he really was a big support. He helped me get all the right paperwork in place. Granted, it took a little extra work. I actually had to see an immigration therapist so I could make a case that, you know, that I needed to live here, that this was my home, and that if I were to be deported, it would be detrimental to my health. And so I don't think a lot of people have the fortune of being able to do that, but thanks to my legal team and submitting all the paperwork, and granted, I didn't sleep well for months that summer because, again, I submitted the new application, and then I thought, all right, here's another 36 months until I hear back and find out whether or not this worked. And then most of the time, the way that the immigration offices work is that you'll just get a piece of mail and you have to act on it. So you fast forward a few months, and now we find ourselves in November, and it's literally the week before Thanksgiving, and I get a letter from the USCIS office again saying, come in for your citizenship interview. That was just the biggest gift I've ever received in my life. And it was a real shock to find out that immigration had acted so quickly on my new application. I don't know if that would have been the case if I didn't have a lawyer, because quite honestly, I don't think I would have ever thought of seeking the help of a therapist. And I really don't know what extra information I could have given the government except for the applications that they ask for to help make my case. And so that's the problem with our immigration system right now, is that it's very unique depending on who's applying and what your background is and what your country of nationality is. So because it's not mainstream at all, you can't really find the answers, because things might apply to you that don't apply to the next person. So if you have the means and if you have the community to help you get a lawyer, if you're in need of a lawyer and you're an immigrant, I really suggest that it'll save you a lot of sleepless nights. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I just wanted to take some time to talk about your experience with the immigration system, because like we were talking about, not a lot of people know just how stressful and convoluted it can be. And that's why, you wrote MAMACITA also, is because it does require money in order to access the resources that you need in order to stay, which is why this is such an important project. I want to talk a little bit about food before we close it out. Take it back to the book and the recipes that you've included here. I loved the essay that you have inside that talks about why you decided not to include any tacos in the recipes. And you quote Chef Gabriela Camara, who says, anything can be a taco. Can you tell us why you decided not to include any taco recipes, and also talk a little bit about some of the recipes that people can look forward to cooking? Are there any that you would eat with your family to celebrate? Any dishes that you would just eat on the day-to-day? And share a little bit about that with us.
Well, I think Gabriela Camara put it perfectly. Her book, if you guys haven't read it, My Mexico City Kitchen, is one of my favorites, and I highly recommend that people look to add that to their bookshelves as well. But what really resonated with me with her quote that anything can be a taco is that truly Mexican cuisine is made so anything can be a taco. I think that I personally think that spending $8 at a restaurant for a taco is a little bit shameful because a tortilla is really just a vessel for Mexican and anyone. But in Mexican culture, a tortilla is just a vessel to get the food from your plate to your mouth. So even sopa, like even soup, can really be a taco. I write about this in the book, but growing up, sopa de fideo was a weekly staple at the dinner table. It's a tomato noodle soup, very similar to what a lot of American kids eat, but it has a little bit more sazon, which is and in Mexico, you would often just slather a tortilla with some sour cream and salt and then dip that into the noodles and eat it. So I think for me, it was really important if I wanted to make a true Mexican cookbook that I didn't include a taco recipe, because anything in this cookbook is a taco recipe if you want it to be. Like ensalada de calabacitas, which is a zucchini salad that I have in the cookbook. Heat it up, put it in a corn tortilla, put a little bit of sour cream on it, put a little bit of salt on it. Like, you won't regret it. That if you want a vegetarian option for a weeknight dinner, do that. It's gonna be delicious. And so that's really my choice for not putting any tacos in there. And as far as you asked me what's something that I would eat with my family often or special. One of my favorite recipes in the book is bacalao a la vizcaína. It is a fish stew soup. It has olives. It originated in Spain, but it was very often at my family dinner table around Christmas time, especially in my dad's side of the family. So my mom usually switches on and off each year between cooking something that was part of her family and something that was part of my dad's family. And this is one of those dishes that's just almost too good to be true. Like, it's so delicious, and it's so warming, and it's perfect for like those winter months. So that's a staple. That's a favorite. One that raises a lot of memories for me is cuernitos. So cuernitos are a Mexican cookie. They kind of taste like Mexican wedding cookies because they're also made with walnuts, but they're dipped in chocolate. And my aunt growing up had a bakery right next to my grandparents' home, and she would sell cuernitos. So cuernitos always remind me of Saturdays at my grandparents' homes every time I eat it. And they're excellent with a cup of coffee. So for all of you coffee lovers, don't skip on that one.
Yeah, I can't wait. I can't wait to try some of the recipes in your book. Thank you for sharing it with us.
Sure.
As we are getting ready to wind down for the evening, I want to remind anyone, if you have any questions for Andrea or Kelly, you can submit them in the Q&A. We'll get to those in just a few minutes here. I'm going to turn it over to Andrea and Kelly, but before we do, can you tell us about sobremesa?
Yes, I love sobremesa. So for those of you who don't know what that word means, it's a word that is often used for the time that you spend lingering around the dinner table after you're done eating. It usually comes with dessert and coffee or tea. So even though you're really full, the conversation is really rich and you just don't want to walk away from it. So we specifically have a word to explain that period of time that you stay lingering around the table. And you know, if you're gonna see family or friends this weekend, I really recommend experimenting with sobremesa. Maybe force yourselves to spend a little bit more time at the dinner table, even after you're done eating, and just see what conversations come out of that. Because that's really what sobremesa is about. It's a time for connection. It's a time where like true intimate conversations come up. I think after our bellies are filled, there's nothing else than spilling your heart over. So one of my favorite moments of each meal is sobremesa.
So with that, I'll turn it over to our virtual sobremesa with Andrea and Kelly. They're going to share a little bit more about the this month's Kinfood box before we get to all of your questions.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about the recipes that I developed and then pass it on to Kelly. But if you guys are getting the Kinfood Farm Box this month, I couldn't be more excited for all of you. Honestly, I don't want to be biased, but it's gonna come out at such a special time. The box is launching at the beginning of Hispanic Heritage Month. And next weekend on September 16th is also Mexican Independence Day. So if you're trying to celebrate any of those two, I recommend getting the box. The dishes that I developed for them is something that would be eaten at my dinner table any weeknight with my family. One of the dishes, the main entree, is carne de puerco con rajas and salsa. So what that is pork chops, which are in a bath of a tomato salsa that's just a little bit spicy, with rajas of poblano, which are just poblano pepper strips. And it's a very savory dish. More than spicy, is savory. And you eat it with a side of torta de lote, which is actually a corn cake. And it's not like American corn cake in the sense that this one is not crumbly and dry until you add butter to it. This one's pretty sticky, and it's very sweet but very versatile. So the traditional way to eat it is by putting some of the salsa on top, adding ranchero, queso fresco, and then a raja, and it just brings this nice different texture and sweetness to the pork dish. Additionally, I really recommend saving the corn cake leftovers and trying them out with a little bit of cinnamon on top and a cup of coffee the next day, because it also makes a really delicious sweet treat. And then lastly, for dessert, I wanted to do something a little different to celebrate the end of summer and welcoming fall in. So wanted to use some of those last juicy pears of the season, and created a Mexican cinnamon poached pear, which is really sweet. But then it's paired with crema pastelera, which, if you can think of a donut, it's the cream that goes inside of a donut, but it's a Mexican cream. So it's actually made with maicena. It's a product of corn. I think the flavor will surprise a lot of you. It's probably one of my favorite desserts that I've ever created, because it's really delicate and just a perfect ending to the meal. So I hope that you guys all enjoy that with your Kinfood farm box this month.
That's great. I don't really have anything else to add to that, other than when I was reading the stories of Andrea, like the backstory of why she chose these recipes, I think just the realization that corn is so foundational to, especially like, the Mexican table, is really something I think we've lost in America. Most corn now is grown for livestock to consume, and there's also just this stigma that corn is unhealthy, when really, it is like the bedrock of. It seems like, at least that's, maybe you can talk a little bit more about that. I found that very interesting, Andrea. I thought that was just really beautiful what you wrote about corn. So maybe you want to touch on that really quick.
Absolutely. So for all of you who are not so familiar with indigenous Mexican cultures, and specifically the Aztec culture, but Native Mexicans and Aztecs believe that humans came from corn, because corn was the most abundant food in Native Mexico, and there were tons of different types and colors of ancient corn. And so they believe that we came from corn, and they celebrated corn gods every year, every harvest. It was really a celebration, and it was something where it was celebrated from the moment that the initial young maize was planted to when it was cultivated at the end of summer. So I knew that for this Kinfood box, we needed to add corn, because this is the season where it would have been finally harvested by the Aztecs. And it was a really beautiful celebration where the women would actually let down their hair, and each of them would dance and grab 5 ears of corn that they would then bring back home. And the elderly women in the culture would do the same, but on top of that, they would also bring it home and place the corn in a very specially woven basket that sat outside of their doors. Much like babies, they would actually swaddle the corn and carry it on their backs like babies. And they put the corn to rest in those baskets to celebrate the resting of the gods until the next harvest season. So corn is really, really special. You can see it in pretty much every aspect of Mexican food. Most commonly is the corn tortilla. But a lot of people are not familiar with maicena. Maicena is a little bit different than maseca, which is what's used to make tortillas. Maicena is essentially cornstarch, which sounds kind of crazy, but we drink it. It's called atole. And atole is usually a sweet drink that you can drink at night and just puts you straight to sleep. But I wanted to use the same atole to create the crema pastelera. So the cream is a lot less of the milk that makes it creamy, but more the corn. So I hope that you guys really enjoy experimenting with that.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. Just that background. I think that's so powerful, and just it makes it so much more meaningful. I think when you'll receive this box of kin food, produce from farmers who are local, and we're going to try to source most of the ingredients for your box from Hispanic farms around the area, specifically from a farm incubator called Viva, who work primarily with Hispanic and BIPOC farmers to help them establish their own farms. And so, yeah, I think it's going to be great. I put a link in if anyone is in Seattle and would like to order Andrea's special edition kin food box. You can find the link in the link or on kinfoodco.com. You can also order her cookbook and have it delivered with your box if you're in the Seattle area, or you can buy it on Book Larder as well. And then there are also these adorable tote bags for sale, which you can see on the website too, which, yeah, you just got to get one. They're so cute.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah, I know Kelly dropped the link and Meghna has the link, and then you guys can also visit MAMACITA which a lot of you are already familiar with. But if you want a signed copy of the book, you can get those exclusively through Book Larder. And I'm really excited, you guys, and I want to thank you all. I know we're going a little bit over time, but to me, it's really special to have this moment with you guys. So I really appreciate you staying tuned and being a part of this conversation.
Like, we had one question in the queue. Did you want to go ahead and answer this, Andrea?
Of course.
Samantha asks, can Andrea speak to how she went about accessing a reliable lawyer? That in itself is another cumbersome and often scary endeavor for families that are often taken advantage of.
Samantha, you're totally right. I was really fortunate at the time that I was seeking a lawyer. I was employed somewhere where we had access to just mental health benefits. So it was actually through my community of therapists that I got recommendations for a lawyer. And you're totally right. I kind of had to go through a few, much like finding a personal therapist, which I'm not sure if you or others here have gone through that process. It's kind of an interview process. It's a little bit of a vetting process. That's the reason I really felt strongly about getting permission from my personal lawyer to add his information, because if he's not able to help you, he has a whole resource of other lawyers just like himself who are equally amazing and here for you. I would say that if you don't have that sort of access, obviously just doing a quick Google search won't get you very far, but if you do Google, try to find their websites and try to read reviews. Hopefully there's some good reviews in there, but otherwise my door is always open. And Mamacita's email is accessible to everybody. So it's mamacitacookbook@gmail.com. If anyone ever needs me to connect them to my lawyer, besides seeing his information on the cookbook, I'm really open to talking about that. I think that the more transparent that we can be about the process, the better it can be for everybody. So always happy to share the resources that I have.
Thanks so much, Andrea. That's really generous of you. Thank you.
Okay.
As we are winding down, I just want to share actually one comment that came up in the chat from Francisco Pons.
Hi, Dad.
It said,
here. Hello.
in Mexico, sharing food is one of the most important and key moments of fraternity and acceptance of others. Andrea's book is the first step to invite others to discover what fantastic can be the time spending sharing food and sobremesa time. God bless. I just want to thank both you, Andrea, and you, Kelly. Thank you so much for joining us tonight and sharing your work with us, sharing this project with us. It was personally really fascinating to talk with both of you, and I am sure I could speak for everyone that's listening today, just based on some of the comments that are coming up in the chat, that they've also really loved tonight's event. So thank you again. This event will be posted on our YouTube channel if you'd like to rewatch it. For anyone that registered, I'll also send along the links to the Kinfood box and MAMACITA cookbook in a post-event message that'll come just straight from Zoom. I think that's all we have time for, but have a great night. Thanks again. Can't wait to see what you get up to in the future, and can't wait to see all the delicious food that everyone makes from their Kinfood boxes.
Thank you, Meghna. Thank you, Book Larder. Thank you, Kelly and Kinfood, and really thanks to everyone who joined this evening. I will forever remember this day, and I'm really excited to keep sharing and growing with all of you. So, thank you.
Thank you both. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.